Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to talk about their impact and relevance today. I'm Tim Longo Jr., and I'm joined, as always, by a man who, in real life, is already good at stealing the powers of his enemies.
Brett Duville. And you say a weekly podcast, but it has in fact been several weeks since our last podcast.
Darn it, I forgot to change that.
I want to say thanks to everybody for their patience. There were just a lot of things going on. I had some travel. Tim had some. You had some travel, didn't you? I think.
You
had visitors
and
people traveling to you.
Life
Yeah, a lot of life stuff. So it's been a crazy last number of weeks. It was good to have a little extended break, and we're not planning any others anytime soon. But we do want to thank you for your patience while we figured out what the heck we were doing.
And we also
I watched a billion films, so
Oh yeah, nice. Yes, exactly. Well, vacations are important. We did. It's good that we had a podcast come into our place and take up the slack. It sounds like I'm a little behind on Twitter, but
that's true.
But yeah, thanks to the pooches for chipping in and finally doing some work. Because
you might actually be able to hear one here in my background. I'm not sure if you can quite pick that up, but there is a dog out there barking while you're talking.
I can't quite hear it, but might pick it up. I do have one. I do want to post. I'll find a good picture of him, but I do want to post one more picture of the third silent dog in at least in my household, who I will consider to be the maybe the silent producer of the podcast, Henry, who I don't think people know about, but he's not a barker, so we don't really know of him.
No, Henry's the quiet one.
Yeah, he's the
subtle one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Yes, those are very, 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 very fun. I can remember, let's see, Bark Souls, Soul Rover. Let's see, what were the other ones?
There's some humdingers. Mark even did a Mark Garcia, I think, is who we're talking about, right?
Yep.
He did a logo, which I noticed finally, which you changed. That's amazing. Bark Souls. What else we got? Wait, what? Oh, he made I didn't realize that. He also made a Twitter account. I missed that.
He did.
Oh, what is this? The Shenmue?
Shiba Enmue.
Yeah.
Enmu, yeah.
Resident Beagle.
Oh, yeah, Resident Beagle. That's right.
Resident Beagle. That's incredible. Yeah.
We record at the end of my my work day, my long work day, so my memory is a little scattered at the moment, but very good times, Mark. All right, well let's turn to a new game. Let's turn the page. Let's put the dogs in the kennels, and turn to a new game. We are starting a new series, and we should do a production note as well as we do this. We are playing MegaMan 2, but we decided off air, and I never announced it on Twitter, so apologies. We're also going to play MegaMan X, which someone actually suggested to us that we should do something like we did with Castlevania, where we played, I think, a SNES and PS1 era game, as I recall. This time we're going NES to SNES. So.
Right. It was 4? Yeah, I guess we did skip the NES for Castlevania. We played 4, right? Castlevania 4, and then Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, because I had the Mode 7 stuff. There's definitely...
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, so Mega Man's going
crazy
back.
Low frame rate issues. So we're actually going even further back with this series to go to a 1989 game in Mega Man 2. You should probably discuss why Mega Man 2 and not Mega Man. Because I'm a Mega Man idiot. I have not. This is the first time I've ever touched a Mega Man game. I'm vaguely aware of the series, but knew its deal was like you fight some men's, and those men's give you weapons. Although I got that while I was playing. We'll talk about that later. And you can fight them in any order potentially.
Yeah.
And those are the things I knew, you know, as like touchstones of the series, but you know, I was not a SNES, you know, person. So I was not a console person until the PS2. So there's a lot of those games that are lost on me. So you'll be driving the bus tonight.
So I didn't actually research this beforehand of our own podcast, but now I'm thinking, what NES games have we played? I guess, well, Pokemon would have been, so that's just Game Boy.
Yeah, that's Game Boy.
Is this our first NES game?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely played some, and I don't know if we talked about it, but I played some original Metroid.
You did, yeah, you did mention that some, but that wasn't even official, right?
Yeah, that wasn't no. It was just I went to look and see what it was like, and it had, you know, similar technical, and we haven't played any Zeldas that are that old.
No, that's kind of my point, is that it didn't dawn on me that because we intentionally skipped some NES entries into some of the classic franchises we played, like Zelda, like Metroid, right? We skipped to Super Metroid, we skipped A Link to the Past, those sorts of examples. But anyway, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm forgetting something, but it's interesting to me that's where we are. But anyway, so Mega Man 2, 1988 in Japan, end of 1988 in Japan, and then 89 in the US and PAL. And the reason we skipped, it's Mega Man 2. It's sort of like playing. I mean, we've done this actually quite a few times in the podcast where we kind of skip the first iteration. So even our first one, System Shock 2, right? We didn't play System Shock. Right. We played System Shock 2 because, in our opinion, and in sort of the internet's opinion, you know, that oftentimes that second iteration is more of the distilled down example of the formula that we're playing, the reason we're playing it, right? And so, you know, Mega Man 1 and 2 are not drastically different, but the 2 is just distilled or just refined enough to kind of be the best sort of first entry into playing it for the podcast's sake, because there's not a lot of story or anything, you know. It's not like we're missing anything, and there's just some quality of life and simple things that, you know, again, like you know, when they saw what they had with Mega Man, you know, you make the next one and you just, you know, you make some refinements and it's just a little bit better. But Mega Man 2 is considered to be, of the NES games, I think the best one. So that's where I started, at least in my proposal for it. But from a, you know, not a lot of drastic differences between them.
And I assume it's different men's.
Every game, yeah. I think after a while they do it. Bring back fan favorites, you know, where they do like iterations of Woodman or something like that. But that's kind of its thing. I mean, that's sort of the point of it, is that even in 2 that we're playing now, you see some like Flashman or what was the one? I just blanked on his. Anyway, somewhere you're like, it's not like Metal Man. Yeah, okay, I get it. Woodman, I get it. But Flashman, like, what does that mean? So they start getting. I think one of the cool things about the series in general is that they have a lot of fun with the bosses, right? And kind of think of unorthodox examples, while still having some obvious ones like
Airman. I mean, what's Airman?
Yeah.
So, I played down the left-hand side. We'll talk about that when we get there as well. But we should first, I guess, set I was just curious why 2. But we should set this game in its time, and talk a little bit about, I guess, Capcom, and we can go into that as well as we talk about the game itself.
Yeah, 88 first I'll talk about it, and I looked into both because I think both years are important to set it in its time. But talking about some games of note that really actually do touch the podcast because of games we played in the future. Just to kind of rattle off some, Wasteland from Electronic Arts, which is, you know, obviously leads to Fallout. We have Dragon Quest 3, which was Enix before the merger. RC Pro-Am I wanted to mention, which was early Rare, kind of like one of the first game. I mean, really good game. in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, but it also was early, like, oh, who are these Rare people, And of course we played, what did we play from Rare? I'm blanking. Have we not played anything from Rare? I thought we did.
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, Rare. We'll get there for sure. And then Bionic. I'll get back to Bionic Commando because that's Capcom. Ultima was still pretty big at this time. Ultima 5, I believe. Yeah, it looks like 5. And so on the Nintendo front, you have in Legend of Zelda 2 or Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, coming out in America. But then, the NES is still going strong. And so people are still in the US playing the original Legend of Zelda, and it's still winning awards and stuff. Tecmo with Ninja Gaiden. Final Fantasy II, to give you a sense of where that franchise is going on the Square side of things. And then Pool of Radiance was one I wanted to mention specifically too, because of its relationship to, of course, Baldur's Gate. And we did talk about the Gold Box series when we played that game. And that was way back in PC RPG, CRPG.
It's one of those game series that I think if you search for Gold Box on the site, I'm sure it comes up quite a number of times because it's part of that lineage of RPGs. I'm sure anytime we've played an RPG or things with RPG elements, we've probably mentioned it, or even like tactical games, like top-down tactical games, or the games that have that, like the Final Fantasies or the Chrono Triggers or what have you. So
isometric, yeah. I did forget that we did play Populous, so I'm moving to 1989 now, and Populous was one that we did play. So to give you a sense of that, and that, as we talked about in that series, that game was very early PC game type of game, where it's like very proof of concept and so it's like, again, the experimentation that's happening in the PC space now is just like all over the place, really. Then you have Super Mario Land on Game Boy, to give a sense there. And then let's see, the next one, maybe Prince of Persia from Broderbund was coming out at this time. And so we played, obviously, Sands of Time there, and we did talk about the original. SimCity, which is a series we haven't played yet, was also in 89. Castlevania 3, to give you a Konami sense there. Also on the NES, as a competitor to Mega Man, on the Konami side, you have Contra being something that was a series that had a few entries at that point, or at least 2. And yeah, so that's just kind of giving a general sense of the era. We're going back to 88 and 89, which we haven't gone back that far too often. Sierra is also still in the mix here, which we played Space Quest and King's Quest from, but we're talking about like King's Quest 4 at this time, games like Manhunter, Colonel's Bequest was one you mentioned. And so I would say this is, Sierra's kind of running on all cylinders pretty much at this point, but then, a few years after this, they start, sort of, I think they get purchased at that point and start kind of, that's where the PC adventure game sort of question starts coming up of like, are they dead kind of thing, etc.
Right.
In the early 90s. So,
this is the only the fourth pre-1990 game we've played. So
okay, yeah. So
Kings and Space Quest and Populous. As far as I can find. I'm this is an older timeline. I don't think everything's on here, but I think it's pretty close to everything. So I don't see anything that came out any earlier on our more recently played games, because we actually have been playing games that are a little more recent lately in a lot of cases. So over the last year or two.
Right. Yeah. So it is, I have felt for a little while, that's why I suggested that, Mega Man is, so to talk about Capcom for a second, right? Inafune is attached to this game as an artist. And so we talked about him within the Resident Evil series, etc. And Capcom, largely we've been talking about Resident Evil and those games that we played. But at this era, we have Bionic Commando, we have Mega Man, we have, they're still in there, very much in their side-scroller platformer era, and Mega Man is something that, though Monster Hunter and Resident Evil have really kind of transcended into the top upper echelon for Capcom, Mega Man is still one of those, it's their Mario sort of, right? It's like, it's one of those mascot kind of games that has, in my opinion, a pretty unique take on the side-scroller platformer, hybrid with some shooting and things like boss design and stuff like that, with I think a unique structure, which I've always appreciated, because it's it's not a Metroidvania explicitly, it's not a Mario game explicitly, right? They've owned a space there, but it has had again, in my opinion, it has a legacy and a lineage that has moved forward, whether people realize it or not, especially with some of the mechanics and sort of progression, I guess I'll say, progression loops of how you move through the game. And I was, as we always, I think especially now, always trying to find some sort of link back to Dark Souls. I think for probably the next year, we'll probably bring it up even more so than usual. That sense, the reason that I wanted to relate it to that is that we're going to talk about, I think, in a bit here, is that sense of, okay, what do I want to do where? Like, the structure of the game is like, I have some shortcuts. I can go back to certain places. It sounds like the 2 and 3 allow you to do this even more. But also like getting things from bosses and then choosing what to do with those things. Like I know it's not a direct one-for-one, but these concepts were in this era, from games like Mega Man, where no one would maybe directly connect them, but those ideas those seeds were planted way back here, of those concepts.
Sure.
And these games,
I mean, as a person who's ascending Lord souls into different weapons, I totally understand.
Yeah. So, and Mega Man's old. I mean, it's been around for a long time. So, I think anyway. So that's, I think just to set it in its time a little bit. Again, this could be our first NES game that we can remember. It's ridiculous that we have done this for so long that we cannot remember. I can't remember all the games off.
Well, no, I've double checked. No, we're good. I've been checking the site to be like, did we really not? And we really haven't.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of SNES games, and I mean, one of the reasons, and this is something, I thought about while playing it, is that the technical limitations here don't age super well. In a lot of ways, and also, I think because the games had to be smaller in a sense, right? I mean, they had to be smaller to fit in less memory, and like there's only so much art you can draw at once or whatever. They're both simpler, but rely on difficulty to extend their life, right? In a lot of cases. So, for every, like, I don't know, Tetris or something, that you get on the Game Boy pretty soon after this, you have... you have games like this, which they're not trivial with the rewind that we're using. And I'll be honest, I'm leaning on that now. Not for the boss battles, but for just getting there. I will rewind a few times, and I'm always kind of like I could do this. We were talking about this pre-show. I could do this. But there's a lot of like memorization of patterns, for example, or just pure ornery timings, where it's like you might have to do it 2 times before you're like, okay, that's the way you have to make this one jump, in order to not lose a bunch of health. Although at the same time, it's fairly generous with things like, not so much buffs, but just drops, like to regain your health and things like, or your power, or whatever it is, right. So that it's also doing that. So it is possible, I think, to get through it. And in fact, the first level I did it without any aids because I forgot that it would have it. I went through the whole stage and I was like, this game's got to be a piece of cake. But readers, it wasn't. So it was not the piece of cake I expected it to be.
Well, anyway. I mean, the other aspect, the Dark Soulsium that I wanted to mention, is the run based, like to your point about like going through without using rewind or something. In my memory of playing it back in the day was also this of like, it is very run based. It's like get your patterns, kind of memorization, some pathing, right? Like which path do you want to use? What ability do you have right now to unlock certain paths that you couldn't normally? And knowing where the power-ups are. And then there is some grinding if you're trying to get some of the drops you need, right? Like if you've run out of energy for certain abilities, you might need to actually kill an enemy, run off screen, run back on screen, or you don't even have to run off screen. You just need to make them run off screen, and then
right.
And you're basically grinding to get that, which I did a few times. Of like, okay, I need to refuel, and so those are still very alive today with the Souls-like concept. That it's, again, we talked about it with the run-based feel of Dark Souls some too. It's got a kind of a speed runnery kind of feel to it, where it's like, okay, hit bat. There's rhythm. You're trying to hit things at the right time. You're seeing when the enemies, fire, and it's all like rhythm and pacing based. And
and some things feel really unfair the first time you encounter them. You're like,
exactly.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, the one I'm thinking of in particular, I think was it Heat Man? Is there a Heat Man? I can't find my notes here.
Yeah, there's
way at the bottom.
I don't know if it's heat, but it's, there's a heat fire kind of hot dude.
Yeah, exactly. And his has all these like things that are dropped, or things that appear and disappear. Like they appear in like, Heat Man. So I like, it's a pattern matching thing where it's like you have to memorize this sequence of things. It's very similar to me to, there's a section like that in the first Guacamelee, which is a game I loved, which is like a Metroidvania, very much a Metroidvania, but has some tough platforming sections that are optional, but that definitely remind me of this game. That in particular is like, oh, that's where this came from. This Heat Man memorized these patterns of blocks that appear and disappear and all of that. I mean, they made it a little easier just by like alternating between the two, whereas this is like a whole, it's like, set one, set two, set one, set two. So you could sort of burn your retinas in if you wanted. Like you could kind of stare at it and be like, okay, I know where it is relative to me, and I know, et cetera. But then, so it was easier. But this one's like a whole chain of stuff. That was a place where I was like, thank goodness for this rewind, because memorizing this series of steps would be, it would be, ire making at this, anger making at this point. It's just not a thing we do anymore. That kind of, 12-step memorization of jump here then jump up, because it was over lava in half of it, like, so it's like, oh my god, you get to this point and like the thing's gonna fall away and you're gonna drop in the lava if you don't know. You actually kind of sort of, if you're just kind of playing it, you can kind of go, I see what they're doing, it's probably, this thing's probably going to be happening, but you could guess wrong. You could be like, oh, I probably need to jump up whenever I get to this, and there, but sometimes it might be, oh no, I want to jump to the right before this thing disappears. And so it's I was very happy for modern tech at that point in that level. So
well, I mean, we will get the gist of it. We don't need to punish based on our availability for playing for the podcast. I think it's better that we see the basics, but not have to put because I mean that's definitely one of the reasons I put down MegaMan games in the past, right? Because it's just like you talk about wall stages. That's you're definitely going to be hitting those. Another thing I forgot to mention from a MegaMan history perspective is that as opposed to some of the competitors, and probably you can understand why, because of the structure of the game, they actually released a lot of these very quickly, and they're very, very iterative compared to, say, a Nintendo, right? That takes more time with each of their iterations, like maybe double, I think. Like in the NES, I think they I'm gonna mess this up because I didn't research this, but I think they went up to maybe 6 or something before going.
That's right. I have the collection, and there's like 7 or 8 games in the collection for this. And I think anniversary collection or whatever I have, and I'm like, oh my god, that's a lot of games, right? I
think it was annual, basically, right? Like I think one was 87, 2 was 88, and they just kind of kept, because, again, they can probably prototype and bang out these stages and these bosses in sort of a bit of a vacuum, so to speak, and maybe add in some of the damage type and Metroidvania elements later, potentially. But anyway, it's just a different structure than kind of just a linear game like some of the others. So
yeah, you're right. I mean, there's basically between 87 and 93, there are those 6 games on the NES. So they only skipped 1 year, 89. And I mean, Mega Man 2 came out at the very end. I mean, I think it was December 88 in Japan. So Mega Man 3 probably is fairly early in 1990, would be my guess, just looking at this sort of release schedule. And then they actually released Mega Man 7 and 8 in 95 and 96, but also looks like probably re-releases of the original Mega Man. It's a spin-off title, Mega Man: The Power Battle. Okay, so it's not.
Yeah, and that's where you're getting.
It's a different thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I feel like Mega Man fans are sort of like Sonic fans. Like there's these certain versions of, certain categories where they really are diehards about it. Like the Power Battles, I think, are kind of beloved but different, and then and then 10 is where I believe where it starts. We'll get there, but that's where it breaks off into SNES.
You're not going to be like Mega Man 10 or X, are you? I mean, you're going to have this whole thing.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there's lore reasons there per se, but maybe I'll look it up. It could be.
If there are lore reasons, you'll be the person to find and identify with.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, let's get into the play proper. I mean, the obvious thing. The big obvious thing is sort of this, Brady Bunch grid that you get at the beginning, which I guess means Alice is the final boss. But where you've got, I don't know.
I don't remember who in the Brady Bunch was in the middle, but I'll take your word.
It was Alice.
Okay,
it was Alice. Yeah. The kids were on the sides, left and right. The parents, the dad was on the top, the mom was on the bottom, and then in the middle was Alice.
She was keeping it all together.
On the left, boys on the right. Yeah, and she was just holding it together. Anyway, so the first thing you're presented with, of course, is like this tic-tac-toe board, basically, of enemies, and you just pick whichever one you want. And I was like, I don't know where to start. Like, I'm going in cold. I'm not looking anything up. And I'm just looking at this and I'm just like, I guess I'll just go to the upper left. Like, of course, that makes no sense at all because this is a Japanese game. Maybe I should have gone like upper right and gone like top to bottom, right to left. Is that how the newspapers go? Johnny Gratan, so let me know. I had no idea where to start, except that I couldn't go straight to the one in the middle because that's the first thing I tried. Like, let me just go to this one in the middle. Clearly, that's the most important. Oh, wah, you can't do that one.
Yeah.
And, I knew this about the series, that they were nonlinear. But I guess I did not have a sense of, like, just how little direction you really have.
Yeah.
It's like I also knew it was like a move to the right game. I think I watched a video about the Mega Man X series about like how it teaches you its game, the game. So we'll probably talk about that more when we get there. It might have been a Boss Keys / Designer's Toolkit series. I can't remember. It's a long time ago that I watched that video, but yeah, I mean, it's right there, right at the beginning, and I have to say, getting to the end of it, because that's the one stage I beat without any help, and that was Bubble Man. It said, you have this ability, and it gave me the password, if I want to, start from here. And I just kind of was like, okay. And that was several weeks ago. So, because we were actually originally going to do this show like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I just was like,
yeah. That was
like, okay, and it's like, and that one in particular, starting with that one, That stage is actually fairly short. And like I said, I didn't need any rewind. I didn't use any help. I didn't even know the game had a rewind until you mentioned it, off, just in texting or whatever. So I was also just kind of surprised, like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. I was like, oh, this should be pretty easy. Wow. NES games are really easy. I'm always hearing how hard they are. That attitude did not survive further contact with the enemy. So, where did you start out? And what do you like? I mean, this series a little bit more. You've played this one before?
Played this one long time ago. I couldn't even tell you. It's got to be, it would have been maybe.
You doing math?
Early
30
90s,
years?
Something like that, yeah. Actually, it might have been on the NES though, actually, because I did have that system. I must have played it there. I rented it probably in Blockbuster or something. But I doubt. Maybe I finished it because I do remember some of that. But anyway, I dabbled because I kind of wanted to refresh my memory. I had a vivid memory of Woodman, so I started there actually just to kind of remember some of it. And dabbled in a couple others that just felt too hard. And so I was like, well, these probably I should come back to when I have more abilities. And so I knew you had chosen Bubble Man, so I actually intentionally didn't choose that one, just for the podcast sake. I probably would have landed on that one if I was just playing by myself. But Airman was the first one I did.
Okay.
And
that's the one I gave up on. I was going to go left to right across the top.
Not easy.
And I was playing Airman. I was like, wow, this is really hard. I don't know if I can do this. And I wasn't using the rewind on that either.
Yeah.
And then I went, instead I went down. I was like, well, I'll go counterclockwise, I guess. Like, I have no idea. So you did Heatman and Metal Man then? Correct.
Yep. So I did Airman, I did Crashman and Flashman, fairly randomly. But it's interesting. I have some interesting stories to tell about my random selection because I didn't remember any of this. But anyway, to your point about like lack of direction, like once you understand what the general concept is, the sense of the aha moment, I guess what I'll say is the loose progression and the meta of the game, to be super cheesy, as a kid, you're realizing, wait a second, what if I were to do it in this order? Once you know the game, it's the replayability. It's I have this cart. Yeah. I'm going to play the heck out of this cart. What if I did this? Oh, wait, what is this? What is this door here? Why can't I get through this door? I wonder how I could get through that door. Oh, what if I go get this? You know what I mean? So it's these discoveries that instead of the Metroid, where they do a much better job doling that stuff out to you in a sort of linear-ish, or not linear, but like, oh, I've met a door. I can't get through the door. It has an icon on it that tells me what I need.
Yeah, I can tell my shots are bouncing off of it really obviously, et cetera.
This is more of like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then you're like, oh, I just got this ability. Ooh, I wonder if that. I wonder, now unfortunately, I don't remember if they changed this later on, but you can't. I don't think in one playthrough you can go back and replay levels to test out your theories. So what it ends up being from a replayability standpoint is I'm just playing the whole thing over again and trying to maximize my order. Right.
Well, that's not necessarily true because of the way the passwords work. Like you could presumably like play all of the individual guys, just one at a time individually without the other stuff, and like start from whichever one you wanted, and skip the others.
Oh, I see. So using the password. See, so because I'm also using, maybe I shouldn't use, I'm using the save feature, the save state feature.
I'm not doing that. Yeah, I'm using the password.
So the password,
typing them out.
Refresh my memory then. The password just gives you that ability only, and everyone is still unlocked? Or still
correct,
playable?
Right. So if after I finished Bubble Man, I went and I copied down the grid location. So it's basically just a board with red lights and squares, and it's like 5x5. Yeah, 5x5. And so my password after Bubble Man was like, okay, the red lights are in A1, B5, C4, D1, D2, D5, E1, E2, E4. Like, and I just wrote all that down. And that's not an uncommon thing. I think even as late as like Crash Bandicoot, so early PlayStation, people were using codes still for like, and that one might even have been a word code even, lizard or something would take you to a particular level. And so this is basically just like, you got this far. They know it's a hard stop that you got there.
So when you enter that, though, what does the stage selection look like when you enter that?
It will clear the ones that you've beaten.
Okay, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So I guess my point was that if you did see something that you were curious about,
you can't go back.
You can't go back.
No, the only way to go back, though, would be to keep track of which ones you had done, and just have all the passwords. So it's like, I started with Heatman instead. Like, here's the password for beating Heatman first, and then
passwords are almost like collectibles in a way.
Yeah, in a way, right? And there's an awful lot of them, right? Because there's basically 8 factorial. Is that true?
Yeah, don't. Yeah. You just spoke nonsense.
Whatever. Yeah, sorry. Well, it's because you can choose 1 out of 8. The first one, right? You understand factorial.
I understand generally, but
so there's 40,000 possible orders. I assume you tried them all when you were a kid.
Yeah,
or when you were younger. You weren't even a kid.
You know what?
In the early 90s.
I bet you I did try to brute force it at some point, the same way that in Ultima Underworld I would use hex editing to change my stats.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's a lot easier when you've got an emulator that adds some functionality. That's super nice. So I guess it would be possible at least to start with like, okay, I played it 8 times. I beat each guy, and now at least I could go and be like, okay, now I have some theories about this door, but let me try these other things. Like, so I'll do like Woodman, for example, first. Like, I have no idea. And then go into, I don't know, Metal Man's level and see, is there something I can do there that I couldn't? Now that I have Woodman. That's super cool. I had no idea. I haven't seen any of that. Or at least I haven't read it that way. It's possible I've seen things and not known.
Well, the other, I think some of them are explicit. Like I found one accidentally when I was playing last night. Some of them are explicit, like literal walls or doors or whatever. And then some are more, and that's why I brought up the other meta topic of just like damage types, right? Of like this damage type ability that you got from somebody is really effective against these types of enemies.
Okay.
And so it's like, it's most efficient to have bubbles or whatever against whatever, because they do instant, one hit kills and things like that. So there's those sorts of discoveries too, that they get more and more elaborate, I think, as the series goes on. But to give you an example, a little bit, I guess, of a minor spoiler that you can use if you want to, I just by chance, like I said, played, I probably multiple damage types do extra damage, so it's not like there's one true perfect one. There may be, but I think so. I don't know if it's as much as me getting lucky as, I just made sure I used what I had. But Airman's ability, which I remember vividly liking because it shoots little tornadoes in an upward arc, so you can get things above you and at an angle. Which is nice in some cases because you can't get a beat on them or whatever. And it goes all the way, I think, up the screen, so you can get things pretty high. But anyway,
that would be helpful with Airman.
Yeah, ironically, yeah, right. Well, you don't need to play him again though once you get it. But that damage type was highly effective against Crashman when I fought Crashman. Like 2 shots or something, I took him down, and that was kind of for me blind luck, right? But then Crashman gives you. Are you okay with me spoiling? I think.
Okay.
Crashman gives you bombs that you can throw in place, and I think they stick to walls and stuff, and they go off in a couple seconds. Those are needed to blow up walls in Flashman's level, which maybe there's other ways to blow up those walls, and they basically give you shortcuts and stuff. So I just lucked into, I had the bombs. I went to Flashman, and I could get through those walls.
You'll be happy to have that as well, I think, for Heatman, because there were places where I was like, that looks different.
Yeah.
That wall looks different, but I shoot it and it just bounces off. So I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea.
Probably bombs, yeah.
Like, and I did not realize there was this aspect to it, where this kind of order was important. So yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the sort of the pro con of this, obviously, as we talked about, is yes, there's cool replayability and there's those moments of discovery of like putting two and two together. But to your point, unlike I think a Nintendo game, which would do a much better job at telegraphing to you enough information to make decisions about what to do, this is much more trial and error, right? It's like, okay, I'm just going to go and see what does what, and I'll experiment. Maybe I'll replay. I mean, I'm sure a speedrun of this game is very fast, right? So if you know what you're doing, replaying the whole game to experiment on the optimum. I mean, every Mega Man game has the order, right? Like the optimum order of bosses, every single one. And that's sort of like, that's what people do for the Mega Man games. Yeah.
All right. The world record speedrun is 26 minutes, I guess. I see one that's 23 from last year. That's 23 minutes.
Wow.
23, whatever. So yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty quick. Looks like the leaderboard says 26 and a half. So I don't know what that other one is. Maybe it's tool assisted or something like that.
It's the Donkey Kong guy. He did that one. Oh, that was a shade. I forget his name. King of Kong.
Yeah. Steve something? I can't remember.
Sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to throw shade at you, but
I don't know.
Your record is not officially recognized. Anyway,
you remember that guy's the total 80s guy. Anyway, he's still dressing as if it.
He's living in his era.
He's living in his era for sure. That's the thing. You got to he's a method guy. He's got to inhabit the. Anyway, whole thing. So the other thing I wanted we should definitely talk about. So that nonlinear select and like getting those weapons and opening things up. Like I'm totally gonna go look because I'm gonna be curious now, and it's not gonna impact how I play because I'll probably still just go counterclockwise. That's wild. And I can see sort of like, and now I'm wondering, like, was this thing I saw, like, would that have helped me? How would it have helped me? And I'm very curious.
Yeah.
So I'll do some more reading just out of curiosity. I don't think I'll change how I play because I'm leaning into the rewind, which definitely takes it to a like, all right, well, can I do this next section? And not.
Yeah.
I don't want to start from the beginning. Having done it once, and been like, it's not too bad. Like the next two that I try were like, oh my God, this is brutal. And I was like, oh, that's right. Tim said rewind. So that's what I did instead. You had mentioned that Capcom's flavor of platforming was a little different, and I have some thoughts, but I'm curious what specifically you had in mind with that.
Well, yeah, it's there, as we talked about, like the landscape at the time with Mario's feel of their platforming being so great, but also fairly specific, and there's sort of a predictive quality to it, even though they have air steering and stuff. To some degree, there's still I guess we talked about it with when we played the Mario games, but there's a bounciness to their physics, right? And Mega Man for me, and I don't think actually Mega Man's alone with this, but Mega Man's always the one that I associate with it. And I think it's maybe the one that led on this, is because Metroid actually has a little bit of this going on too, but, it's very pixel perfect, and, its physics are not as like as bouncy, right? It's like it feels a little bit more grounded and specific, and there's a sense of, you hit your head on something and you feel it, and you gotta like, if the arc of the jump is very specific with the level design, and you gotta hit that arc at the right time, because you could hit your head and then you just fall down or whatever. And so, and you can stand, you can inch your way on the edge of a of a platform and your feet are hanging over and stuff like that, where you're like, and then of course, all during this time you can fire, right? So you have this extra level of course you can do that with certain abilities in Mario too, but it's not as specific, right? You can fire off of a ladder.
And Clank, okay. Is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, you bring up Ratchet and Clank, but you can see how the people who made Ratchet and Clank are Mega Man fans, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the abilities alone, like the concept of Crash Man or whatever, and getting the bombs, it's like it's all there. It's
for sure.
So
yeah, I mean, for me, I definitely the thing I definitely noticed, although I didn't stop like sort of leaning over the edges or everything, I'm very conditioned by Mario to constantly move, which is like in Mario games, you want to be running through the stage, right? And it sort of encourages that speed, and like you're reacting as you go, probably you've learned the level really well and you've kind of muscle memoried your way through it, but you're kind of dashing all the time, and here definitely with Airman in particular is where I started to feel it very specifically, like, and then again in Metal Man with those disappearing blocks, was like, okay, I actually have to stop and pay attention now.
Yeah.
Or I have to stop and not jump to the first head or whatever those things are, floating in the air in Airman. I have to stop. Like, I want to wait. Maybe I'll jump up and down and shoot some things so it's clear, so that when but then there's this definite timing of like, yeah, but when those barriers start to come down, they're also going to spawn the enemies in a different way. So that's another thing, is that there's a lot more spawning of enemies rather than these enemies are placed in the level in advance. So there are these places. I mean, there's a rhythm to them still, and a rhythm, I presume if you spend a lot of time on it, you can learn. But it's also very like, I'm on the screen and things are going to
reactive.
Yeah,
sort of.
And I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to have to react to what I'm seeing, but there's also a rhythm maybe I can learn.
Yeah.
Because I noticed as like the barriers would come down on those heads, it was like, okay, now it's easier to jump onto them. But as those are coming down, it's actually spawning new creatures, which makes it harder in some ways to get to that thing. So it's like you're making these decisions of like, well, which do I want to do? And of course, you don't want to let too many of them pile up. So there was a lot going on there in that level in particular. And I got like 2 or 3 heads in, and before I was like, okay, this is going to take me forever. So I'm gonna move on and do a different one. But I definitely felt that, and I felt I also felt the pixel perfect edges a lot, because I frequently will fall off an edge in a way I really almost never do in a Mario game. It's more because I was running fast and just kind of like, wool gathering. Just kind of like, oh, I'm running, and I sort of lose track of or the obstacles come up too fast or something like this. Here it's like, I came right up to the edge thinking I'll be able to jump, and I'm just a frame too late, and it's like, oh, I went just a little bit too far and I fell. That happened to me a lot as well playing it. So I definitely feel that lack of bounciness and forgiveness is not really the right term. But I do feel that sort of like
it's like learning.
It even comes down to the pickups. Like if I go next to one of those yellow pickups that I guess fully refills my power meter, whatever I'm using, like that also stops you, like, so you can't build up like a sort of running momentum. It's a very much more like I'm gonna move up and
it's a little
see
more
what I can see, etc.
It's a little more I think tactical is too strong of a word, but they're adding in a little bit more, like you said, decision making. And of course, if you do memorize it and you are really good at it, you're probably playing it almost like a Mario game. But I don't think most people do, right? Because there's always a moment of assessment of what's going on, because you do have time to actually, specifically think about what to do and react to it. But again, tactics is too strong of a word, but you are making decisions differently than just reacting to it, or executing skill per se. At least the way that I think a lot of people play. There's definitely the super fans out there that really get it. But to your point on the movement model and the physics model, it's like, in a way, you're just you have to learn a different one. And if you're used to platformers that are Mario like or influenced by that, it's it's sort of a bit of a brain brain transition you have to make, mental transition you have to make to think differently about where am I going to fall off a platform versus where you're used to maybe with Mario or something. I mean, one simple thing that I've always felt, I don't know if it's the case, but I've always felt it to be the case. Mario's artwork is fairly cubical. Like he occupies a square, right? A box.
Yeah.
MegaMan has, though his collision might ultimately be a box, his feet stick out. He's shooting when he falls down. His fall animation, by the way, is just one of my favorite pieces of 2D animation ever, where he kind of does that, like his arms go up and his feet are kind of dangling, and he goes, his face, his facial expression is just classic to me.
I mean, it reminds me a lot of like, just in general, like from his character design and from the other characters, it's very like, shonen manga, Shonen Jump and other stuff. I mean that influenced, obviously Chrono Trigger we talked about a lot, as far as the manga stuff. We didn't talk, I don't think we specifically said manga, might have said anime. But
look at the covers of the MegaMan. If you look at the covers of the boxes, it's very much
he's very Astro Boy, that comes up in the collection, like you can see the covers. He definitely reminds me of that kind of era of Japanese.
Astro Boy is a good reference.
Animation and comics, manga. For sure. It's not something I'm by any means expert in at all, but I do know a little, and I see that, and I think that character comes across really, really well. With a limited number of sprite states or whatever, they still managed to infuse a lot of character in there in a different way that Boxy Mario does, or even some of the RPGs we've talked about too, which have a lot more space to deal with, because they're SNES games in the cases of the ones we've played. So super cool. All right, cool. I was going to suggest we put a pin in it there because we're at 51 minutes or 52 minutes, and we should probably at least try to get a couple emails done since we've been gone so long. They've been piling up. So I don't want to let them pile up indefinitely. These were, of course, sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. We will hit a lot more with Mega Man. Oh, and I should mention our production note as well. We talked about going to Mega Man X. We're also going to finish Mega Man 2 for next episode.
I think that should be fine, especially with Rewind.
Rewind definitely changes the game. We have some other topics to talk about. I'm sure some more will come up. I'll have had a chance maybe to see, or maybe I'll be on the lookout for the sorts of things that you've mentioned.
I think check it out. I mean, I think, one of the downsides to this era of Mega Man that I do think they improve later is the usability of swapping abilities is very cumbersome because you have to go to the start menu and kind of scroll to the one you want, and there's 2 pages, and it's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, but at least the game pauses.
Right.
So
you only had a D-pad, start, select, and AB, right?
Yeah. So it makes sense, but it's like, it's another one of those Nintendoisms of like, designed towards your controller, and I don't think Mega Man did. I think they just they tried to do too much, but anyway, I think they improved that later. But yeah, definitely
it was a problem with other platformers on other systems as well, like Sonic. There's things you had to do in Sonic that I think were really weird, as I recall. Not a game I played a lot of either, but we're also like, ugh, like what is the buttons on this? They have maybe had 3 buttons on the controller or something. It did. Yeah, so it's just like weird, and or it feels weird now, I should say. I guess it's another direction games could have gone, but they didn't. Yeah,
but yeah, take a look, see if you see any of those. I mean, usually it's obviously you can't. The interesting thing from a level design perspective is that they can't guarantee what ability you do have, right? So any of those doors or walls or whatever have to be optional paths, and often they are shortcuts or what have you. So yeah, keep a lookout for them and see if you see anything.
I guess the thing is, I've seen places where it's like there's an extra life there. I guess that's what the head is, right? It's an extra life. And I see those and I'm like, I don't know how I could get that.
Yeah.
And so, and because I've been playing with the rewind and I don't really care, I just would kind of look at it and go, huh, and I'd move on. But I should definitely put on my I don't have rewind hat when I get to places like that, and think about like, how could you get there?
Right.
Like, what would I need to be able to do? Because the steering, I'm like, oh, well, I would just I would drop like like in Tomb Raider or something. I'd drop it, grab the ledge and climb up. But obviously that's not available to me. So what could I do, to get into those spaces, or I don't know, Spelunky, to pick something 2D, where you can fall and kind of grab a ledge and hop back up onto it. That's not a thing as far as I can tell. So, so it's something I'll keep an eye out, because I've definitely seen some places where I'm like, yeah, I don't see how that's possible to get. Which is a mastery thing for later platformers as well, up until, modern day, but I'm sort of thinking Super Meat Boy or whatever, some hardcore platformers of the last, 15 years or whatever. So,
kind of run based, trial and
that's very much like a screen based thing. Like, how can you get across the screen, or two screens or whatever? Yeah.
One other bit of homework on the rewind thing to add in that I'll ask of you, because we're only doing one more session of this one, is if you can make note. I'm trying to make notes myself, and I'll hit some of them next time, but for stages, before you get to the boss, if there's any memorable like level design moments, because I think they're pretty clever in some moments of like how they utilize what you have in the, and kind of the enemy design and the level design. And because we're using rewind, I think we're going to breeze through, like we won't sit in the spaces as long as normal,
right? Because
we're just going to breeze through them. So if you just make note of like, oh, that was neat, because I think that is a strength in this particular game, and it becomes something they get really good at, of like, making a stage in this game is different than making a stage in Mario or whatever, and what makes that good for Mega Man versus
I'll totally,
just if anything you're like, oh yeah, that was a cool sequence, that room was cool, or that jumping puzzle was cool or something.
For sure. Yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for those. All right, let's turn to email. We've got a little bit of time left, so why don't you go ahead and tackle the first one that I sent to you.
All right. Let's see here. Mail 1. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels from Mystery Dip. Hello, Mystery. You mentioned Junction Point Studios in the last podcast. We did? Which...
Well, that was... The last, quote unquote, last podcast would have been a podcast near the beginning of May. So, we're still catching up on
that's the interesting reference. Which coincidentally, I just finished reading about in Jason Schreier's Press Reset, Ruin, and Recovery in the Video Game Industry. Junction Point. Interesting story. That book, along with his previous work, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, the triumph, turbulent stories behind how video games are made, are excellent insights, in my humble outsider looking in opinion, into the people and process behind finished products consumers see, and I'd recommend them to anyone listening who wants to read how the sausage is made. For those with Audible subscription, Ray Chase does a superb job narrating both of them. Regards, Mystery Dip. Oh, cool. I didn't. I've always been meaning to read those, but for me, it's a little bit of like, I don't know if I want to read about my day-to-day life as much as I should, but
I actually read both of those in pre-release copies and gave feedback to Jason.
Oh, you're a saint.
I know Jason a little bit. And so I actually read a really early version of, I guess, Press Reset, the second one. And had some feedback. I'm like, well, I'm seeing a lot of this kind of story, but not a lot of kind of that kind of story. And had some early feedback. So you might have found, I know audiobooks don't normally do it, but in the acknowledgments, I might show up. So that's I guess that's we're not journalism here, but I guess I should say that anyway. But those are enjoyable books. And I think he does a pretty good job of capturing particular stories, and with Press Reset in particular, I think there's with the sort of recovery as part of it. There's also there's some stuff about people going indie after, a tough project or, what have you. like some folks from BioShock Infinite in particular are coming to mind in the moment. Some folks who kind of took that studio closing down and going off and doing some new things. And it's a good book. And I would say as an insider looking in, I think that he gets a lot of good stories. So I know Jason a little bit, so mentioned that. So thanks for that, Mr. E. Dip. I have an email here from John Webb. It says, welcome to the jungle. Subject, we've got fun and games. Hey, Brett and Tim, I'll jump right in. Wanted to thank Tim, I think it was Tim, for mentioning Prey during DGC's BioShock playthrough. BioShock was my favorite game in the genre until I tried Prey.
Yes.
It improves on a lot while keeping the good stuff. I don't know that I ever would have come in contact with it if Tim hadn't mentioned it. Which brings me to my question. I'm in my mid-30s. Me too. And gaming has changed a lot since I was young. I was lucky enough to be able to get a new game every 3 months or so during the SNES era. As has been mentioned in many contexts, there were much fewer games back then. These days, I find myself stagnating as a video game consumer and player due to getting lost in the jungle of the modern games marketplace. It seems like it's becoming more and more likely that I return to experiences that I already know rather than to try something new. Are there any particular methods either of you find useful for keeping up with the times? As always, thanks for the work each of you put into the cast. John Webb. Well, Tim, how do you keep current? Is it by having a podcast where you look at games that are decades old?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think you might be asking the wrong people on this one. At least speaking for myself. I mean, for me, I think it largely comes down to peer recommendations and stuff, to be honest. Like, I mean, I think Brett and I both, well, I mean, I read gaming news every morning, and, and I have a few different sites that I go to. And so you kind of see the zeitgeist, if you will, that way. But I think both of us have built up enough of a network of colleagues over time that, we keep in contact, and I just ask what people are playing, and I know their tastes because I've known them for a while, and I know my tastes and what things might resonate with me, etc. So there really isn't a good answer for me. And to Brett's point, since we started the podcast, which have been, 6 years? What is it now?
A long
forever. Time.
Ancient.
That's completely changed. It's completely changed how I play games because of that. So, so we are kind of a little bit stuck in the past. Luckily, we do bonus episodes every now and then where we play a little bit of modern stuff. But yeah, I don't. It's really, I don't know. Once you get hopefully you have you have or can find a friend group that talks about games. I've always found that that's sort of one of the more reliable. I used to use reviews and Metacritic and stuff like that to guide, but I just, I don't think those are surefire bets anymore. I think it really is. There's so much out there, like you said, in the jungle, that let your heart take you to places. And I'm glad you found Prey. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, for me, I think the biggest thing is that I just listen to a couple of podcasts. Actually, is it just one now? I think I basically listen to one.
Yeah,
now.
I do the same. That's a good point. Yep. I think I consider them friends, but they're not my friends.
Well, in my case, it's Triple Click. I think that's the one I listen to. I used to listen to Waypoint Radio. There's a lot of Waypoint Radio.
I do know Jeff and Christian as well, so I do know them. So
Oh, that's right, and you have DLC. So I know Jason a little bit. I know Kirk pretty well. I don't know Maddie very well, but I've met her a few times. So I'm listening to that, and they're talking about other things that they're playing, and often I'm making a note like, I should check that out. I mean, Kirk loves, Hollow Knight, for example, which is a game that I streamed some of like a year or two ago, and and didn't finish because it was crushing my carpal tunnel, because it's a really very precise platformer, and my arms are getting old. At 30, it's terrible. But I also I would also just question the need, if you're having fun, You know, it's not like I read just current books, for example. I'm a person who reads a lot. I'm certainly not reading just the things that are coming out this year. You know, I'm always reading stuff. I'm going into the back catalog all the time. I'll hear about some writer who has a new book out and that's getting good buzz, and I'm like, oh, I should check that writer out. And so now I've got like 9 books that I'm going to read before I'm going to get to the one that all this buzz is about. And I do that all the time. That's a very common thing for me, to find a new author and just dive in and read everything they've written. So I don't know. I mean, to a certain extent, you know, I know games culture is a lot about sort of keeping up with what's going on. And I've just given up on that. You know, I'm very likely to play, you know, I've talked about on the cast that it's like, well, you know, I like to play checklist games because they're very, like, I can sit down, I can just kind of, you know, sit in that vibe of like, I'm checking things off on this list. That feels good. None of it's super hard. And I could also maybe listen to a podcast while I'm doing it, and cool, you know, and I'm just kind of like, this is just a relaxing time for me. You know, or I could play Dark Souls. I'm now in Dark Souls.
Yeah, I mean, you say checklist.
Like, I do this
checklist.
Yeah,
games,
I do the same thing.
But like,
I do the same thing where it's like, well, you know, we played this game on the podcast. Now I've got to play all of the ones of those. Yeah. So that happens to me as well.
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts. I mean, to that point, I was going to say 2 things. One, I do think you're. It's weird to say this because he's asking us on a podcast, but. I do think your podcast recommendation is good, because I do think I find I keep up with quite a bit that way, even though I don't have a lot of time to listen these days, but I used to. And once you find a podcast of people that you trust, you know, you can get a lot of good or have like-minded tastes. Then I did find a lot of good stuff that way. But then to your point, the other one that I totally agree with you on, don't feel like you need to keep up, is what I like to do is
play our game. You know, as soon as it comes out, you want to get on that.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, like, finding those threads, I think, is something that I do a lot too. And sticking with them. If I find a game I really like and I'm in the mood to keep playing more of that game when I finish it, I go and look at the creator's other games, and, you know, and kind of like fall down that rabbit hole of like, oh yeah, this is something, so I wonder what else is like this, or find like games that are like it. So in the case of Prey, if you haven't played them, played the Dishonored games, you know, and like find a thread and pull on it, you know, and it'll lead you, I think, in interesting places. And it's not always forward, often it's backwards. So I think that's thing.
I also wanted to touch on that thing you just said about, you know, finding people with like taste in you know, one of the things I've always said is don't follow sites, follow journalists. You find these journalists that you play something, and I mean, it's a good thing to do when you've finished or you've played a game, you've enjoyed it, you know, even if you don't finish it, but you've liked a lot of what you played and you're like, I'm looking for something new. Go find the people who really liked that game when it was reviewed. Yeah. You know, there's some games where everybody liked the game, and so that's not going to be helpful to you. You know, but you will definitely, you know, if you follow individuals rather than, you know, than outlets, I think that will also be really helpful. I mean, I really enjoyed listening to Austin Walker talk about games. I can't say that I played a lot. I mean, people who are on podcasts for games play them, you know, they're playing new games every week, every day sometimes, you know. I'm just like, I'm never going to be that. But often there would be games that kind of went on my radar at that point, and I might see them in a bundle, or they're on the PlayStation Plus, which I have, or whatever. And, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I remember, you know, 4 years ago they were talking about this on this podcast. This person I really like this game, and I should check it out. And so even though I'm not super current, I might, you know, at least have been exposed to games that I would have a hard time finding otherwise. Like I used to say, how do games makers reach like my parents, you know, for games that they might enjoy. And now I'm like, how do they reach me? So I guess I've been in the industry 20 years. So I guess I'm basically catching up to where my parents were when I started saying that. So I guess it makes sense.
Oh, so you started when you were 10.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've said that multiple times.
Yeah, you're ahead of your time.
Program when I was 9 or 10. Yeah. So Yeah. All right. That was one for me. You got another one there? We'll do maybe one more each, I think.
Okay. This one is called First Person Football from Ben Zaug. I don't know where this. Brett, you're right. There aren't many first person football games. When did we talk about this? I
don't know.
It's been too long. I'm sure we did.
Yes.
I believe the last.
I mean, it wasn't that many episodes ago. It's just that there's been like several weeks now, you know. So yeah,
if it's over a week, I'm spent. I believe the last, possibly only time was ESPN NFL 2K5, the last non-EA NFL game whose success caused EA to pay for the sole control of the NFL license for simulation football. Let me tell you, that mode was crazy, but really interesting. You're right, that it was really strange, and I had even been playing high school football not many years before. It definitely added a sense of realism, but I can't imagine it was that popular of a mode due to the loss of knowledge from the typical camera perspective. Thanks, Ben from Iowa, Zog. That sounds insane. That sounds just what...
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate it from somebody who is a Trespasser fan. But
yeah, I can't imagine, like, you know, it's so in our blood that the football games are like, yeah, I mean, they going back, right? They're top down, right? I mean, they're, you know, I mean, the first football game I played was that silly, like, I don't know, I think it was Coleco, but you know, the
Tecmo Bowl or something, right? It's like,
well, no, this is like a handheld, the three red lines. Yeah.
I have that on my shelf behind me. I have
of course you
Mattel Electronics Football 2.
It was Mattel.
The handheld electronic digital diode, whatever the hell. I literally have one. It was a gift, and I have it in the box right behind me on the shelf. That game was a great childhood joy.
Future podcast game.
That's one way. You just played that game the same way every time, and you'd win. Like there's no game there. But,
I know, it's hilarious.
That's good.
The game was finding that one, golden path to getting across the field as much as you wanted. Anyway,
they also just simulate watching football TV, right? It's like,
exactly, and I think that was the context in which I had brought it up. You know, and again, I don't remember what game we were talking about at the time, but definitely we were. It might have been in response to a question, like the ways that the games are impacted by other media. But for sure, I was like, I don't know if there's ever been one, but like, you know, I think I even mentioned like once putting on a catcher's mask, an umpire's mask, I guess, and being like, oh my god. Like this so changes your view, you know, because of the all the padding around your face, and like you have no peripheral vision suddenly, and it's wild. I mean,
what wild. The heck? It must have been Morrowind because it was first person. We must have been talking about that.
Oh, almost certainly Morrowind. Yeah, it was almost certainly. Yeah. So
it's like, how did we? Because I remember you telling the catcher's mask story.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it must have been Morrowind. Yeah. All right, I'll do one more, and then we'll call it a night. This is from the Honorable T.H. Isis Meyer name. The subject is Robin Hobb, Dark Souls. Hey, you guys made my day with that book recommendation of Robin Hobb. Farseer Trilogy was one of my all-time favorites. I never get love for the book recommendations.
Yeah, this is good.
I mean, I get some occasionally, but you know, usually we don't read it on the air. But this is a nice long one here. The Farseer trilogy of one of my all-time favorites, along with the next trilogy she wrote, The Live Ship Traders. Both are excellent and also not to everyone's taste, just like Dark Souls. Brett, you made a connection between them, and you're right. I had never thought about it. They share a dark but dignified atmosphere, are understated, have an outsider protagonist, and an original take on a very familiar fantasy world, and use a very gradual reveal of world mechanics as a hook. Not sure if you remember, but Hobb drops many hints about forging and skilling before the reader learns about it fully. I feel like there might be a common design informing them too. Hobb's books are at the tail end of the fantasy excess of the 80s and 90s, David Eddings and co., and Dark Souls was at the end of the big AAA 2000s, which were so different to the 90s gaming. So maybe it came about like how can we strip back the excess rather, and make something more about atmosphere and experience without complicated lore to pad everything out? People say thrash and black metal were a similar reaction to 80s hair bands, but I digress. I love that digression. Anyway, loved your takes on Dark Souls. Keep up the wonderful podcast. The Honorable TH Isis Meyer Alname, if that is my real name. And a good PS here for you. Can we get a butt explosion t-shirt?
No, we cannot. Mark, what?
No,
don't do it. What does that even look like? Like, I don't know.
I think it would be like, you see the back end of this giant spider thing and this blooming fire, and then like just a rolling, person in the foreground and, weird, medieval armor. But that would be my design. But yeah, anyway.
That was a good one.
A little bit of love for the book recommendations. And,
yeah, it's great. It was a good analysis too, of especially the eras. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not. So we normally like set things in their time around, specifically the year they come out, but we don't often actually say, well, what were the longer 5-year trends or whatever, which might be something we need to think about.
Why might they have come out at that time based on previous years?
Or why might they have hit at that time, right? I mean, Dark Souls in particular, like hit in a way that Demon Souls had not, even though they're very similar games. Demon Souls was kind of a dark horse. I think, people who knew, it was like the Velvet Underground or whatever. It's like, it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, it didn't hit big, but everybody who heard it went and made a record or whatever. And this was sort of similar in that way. Launched a lot of indie people who wanted to make something weird, but also like just prime the pump for the next one. And people couldn't get a hold of it. I mean, it's funny because I bought, and still haven't played, but I bought Bloodborne like the week it came out because I was like, oh, I remember what happened in Demon Souls, and I don't know when I'm going to get to this. It's now been however many years, like 7 or 8 years. I don't know when I'm going to get to this, but I'm going to buy it because, it might be hard to get,
Oh, I see. Yeah. Because Demon Souls was so weird as far as copies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Demon Souls was one of those that was just like, if you didn't get it when it came out, I mean, now there's a reissue or the remake, remaster, and I'm sure you could get it. Like, I have a copy of that as well. But that was based on like everybody I knew was playing it, who was in the sort of critical sphere, the blogosphere or whatever at the time. And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to play this right away. I don't remember what I was working on at the time, but, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take this. I'm going to, set it aside like I so often do. This is why I have shelves of games I've never played. I could retire now, never buy another game, and have enough games to last the rest of my life. Yeah. That's a problem. I keep buying bundles, for Ukraine and whatever, and now I've got 6,000 games. But yeah, it's one of those things that I just felt like I had to do. But that total trend for sure. Yeah.
Well, we now know when you're going to play Bloodborne. It's in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, is it the next one? I guess it's the next one, huh? Dark Souls 3. I'm 100.
How would it not be the next one? You mean you would go to Elden Ring or something?
No, I don't think I would. I would probably go to Bloodborne. I was just like, was there anything else? But no, there wasn't anything else.
I don't think so. I think that was.
And then,
in fact, Bloodborne might have come out before 3. Didn't they go back to make 3? Or no? I forget the order.
Dude, I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, I'm playing the Dark Souls series to get, to
see the full,
put that behind me. Yeah. And to see the whole thing, and oh man, amazing. Like, I don't think I even told you. I sent you a text and you didn't reply with like, well, what happened? So, I just like put it out there. But I got to a point in Dark Souls 3 where there was a section that was very similar to that.
I didn't reply because I didn't think you were gonna. I didn't think you wanted to spoil it for me. But that's
you're not gonna play it.
Probably not.
You're not. So I got to the section that was very, very similar to that section in Dark Souls 1 with the archers who are terrible. And I'm running. I'm like, how are they doing this again? Like, this is nuts. Why would they do this again? it's literally, it's like buttresses, and there's these silver knights, and they're firing these arrows down. Like, this is insane. Why are they doing this? I'm in this place called Irithyll Valley or something like that. And I run up and I go up this thing, and there's like a gear switch to like raise and lower this circular structure. And then I'm in Anor Londo in Dark Souls 3. And I'm like, no way.
Wow.
Like, they messed with me just like, it's like, I mean, getting past that was brutal. So again, first I found it way easier the first time I did it in Dark Souls 1, and doing it in this one section. Oh man.
Revenge.
Like, oh my God. Yep. They got their revenge. But I finally figured out a place where I could jump down to, and like, it is a little different, but it was like,
that's pretty self-aware of them.
Like, yeah, very self-aware. Like, they're like, we know this was the toughest thing we ever did, for most players. And I was like, I don't. And then there's a really tough boss in the same place as the tough boss for Dark Souls. So it's a whole thing. Anyway, enough about Dark Souls. That's our last game. That was like a month ago. It's time to move on. Anyway, thanks for those emails to devgameclub@gmail.com. We love to have them. We do also love reviews. Haven't had one in a little while. Love to have it, singing or not. If it's sent to me in the lyrics, or you're clear about what it comes from, I am honor bound to sing it for you on the podcast. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, or on Twitter at devgameclub. We can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
You can also find him twitching at Tim Longo Jr. on twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr., where you are still playing Dark Souls.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to make a call at some point on whether I will actually finish Dark Souls on stream, but because it's been dragging on. But yes, I think I need to at least, like, I don't know, kill one of the golden bosses or something, and I don't know, see how far I get. But yes, I'm where I was when we last saw our fair adventurer,
our trip adventurer, with the excellent GIF, the excellent Blink GIF that is now on the Twitter feed.
There's a bit Drew Scanlon going on there. I don't know if anyone knows that reference, but everyone's seen the GIF, but maybe they don't know who Drew Scanlon is. But you'll look him up.
They thought it was Jeremiah Johnson.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I was listening to Giant Bombcast when that GIF hit and heard him reply, because he had actually already left. But
yeah. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo and our sister podcast is by Mark Garcia. Have fun attaching new weapons to your arms this week, and good night.
Good night.